Hello and welcome to the Rangers Review afternoon briefing with me, Jonny McFarlane. Joining me today is Mr. Joshua Barry. Now, while I'm stuck in, vaguely cloudy Glasgow, there's a little bit of sun, there's a little bit of blue sky, but it's been kind of miserable today, kind of similar to the last few weeks. Joshua is in Geneva. Josh, what is it like out there?
It's been really nice up until you hit press live and then the clouds kind of came over, but no, it has been really nice. You forget what summer is like when you live in the UK, don't you? So, yeah, long day. I was up at 3 a.m. To get the bus over, Johnny. I'd like to send no regards to the bus driver who did not let me on my bus to the airport, and I would like to send regards to my wife who took me to the airport at about 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's been a long day, but good to be here. We've got the press conferences tomorrow. We're going to have videos from the stadium. We've obviously got our match coverage today. And yeah, looking forward to what is such a big game on Tuesday to see if Rangers can make it to the Champions League playoff round like they did last year.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Obviously, the game's on Tuesday. As you say, you're there tonight, you're there tomorrow, you're there Tuesday, you're back on Wednesday. So you're really getting a sense of the city, the country, and of course this game, which is going to be a big one. So what can we kind of expect over the days that you're out there, Josh?
Yeah, well, obviously on the website today, we're going to touch in this show today about the game yesterday, look back on some of the details of the game, the press conference. We've got a couple of graphs from the content on the website today, which is the kind of Stats Bomb report with some analysis in there as well. We'll have a members video later on as well, looking through the Stats Bomb data. But then a lot of social content will be live. I think it'll be myself and Derek tomorrow night as well after the Rangers press conference, which is 5 o'clock. I think it's 5 o'clock Swiss time, so 4 o'clock UK time. And on the day of the game as well, we'll have lots of coverage from the stadium, all you usually get from us on a match day. I'm really looking forward to it, Johnny, because it's such a big game. There's the opportunity for Rangers to build a little bit of momentum that was punctured so spectacularly on the opening day of the season against Kilmarnock. I thought yesterday, while you could still sense the nerves in the stadium, while you can still see this team's very much coming together, football can very quickly become quite a positive game if you put together a few run of results. Now, if Rangers were to get through this, it looks like PSV are the team that will be waiting for them. I think PSV are probably a stronger outfit than this time last year. Obviously, a quite emphatic scoreline in the first leg of their game with Sturm Graz, so it would be really tricky to get past that. But if you look back at the game in midweek, as we'll get into, although Rangers, you'd imagine, will come under a bit more pressure. This is a huge game for Servette. I think it's the first time they're going to have sold out their stadium in something like 20 years. It's about a 30,000-seater stadium. Looking forward to seeing it tomorrow, which it will have on the YouTube channel on the website as well. But as much as it's going to be a big game for them, Johnny, you'd imagine they'll come out, have a little bit more in front of goal. That should present Rangers with the spaces they had in the first leg that they weren't quite able to capitalise upon. So I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I think both teams are probably going to go for it as well, so it should be a good watch.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Josh. I'm sure it will be a really interesting game, and I fully expect Servette to offer quite a lot more than they did on last week. Clearly, they're going to have two of their major players back, one of whom wasn't allowed in because of visa issues, one who was suspended. So it's going to make them a different proposition on the pitch. And then off the pitch, we know how a really, really aggressive, up for it fan base can make a difference in a European night. We've seen that at Ibrox. Now, it's not going to be like that. I think it's only, 20,000 that it holds. But I'm sure it will be a raucous and rousing atmosphere. So Rangers have to be careful of that. Now, listen, just on that game, and we'll come back and drill into a little bit of detail on the Livingston game, because there were some interesting aspects I think we want to talk about, Josh. But just on Rangers, I asked Michael Beale about the first game and about the build-up, Josh, from defence to midfield and then midfield forwards. I think Rangers are actually looking pretty good. They're moving the ball really quickly, a lot more quickly than in the last couple of years. They've got players in there like Rascan, like Cantwell, who can turn the ball around so quick. They don't have to take a touch and move it back, you know. People who are comfortable in taking the ball in little space and then moving it. And I think what we're seeing, and certainly what we saw against Servette, so many occasions where Rangers got the ball through the press quickly and were breaking at the pace and just didn't make the right decisions. So does that fill you with, I suppose, confidence in that this is going to be a game where Servette have to come out and try and score.
Yeah, I guess there's a few things to break down there. Firstly, the Kilmarnock result just punctures absolutely everything, and naturally so, because you've had such a big build up to that game beyond the summer. That is the kind of Michael Beale revolution starting, all these new players in, and not only is it a defeat, but it's a defeat that feels familiar. It's a defeat where players who have been around, I think there's only 5 new signings, so it wasn't quite the team that we're going to start to see, I think, with that whole new front six from when Michael Beale came into the club last November. But you're right to say, Rangers had a really good league record after he came in last season. Outside the Old Firm, I think they lost 1 game. I think if you look at those Old Firm games, as we covered a lot, especially kind of the Scottish Cup final and the game at Parkhead, the 3-2 defeat, those Old Firm games, I don't think they were decided by either team being markedly better than the other. I think they were decided by what Rangers had in either box, which Michael Beale needed to address in the transfer window. So you get to the Kilmarnock game, it completely punctuates it. I think Beale would say, I'm sure he'd say, in hindsight, he maybe got the team selection wrong, because I think we've seen in the last couple of games, especially on Wednesday, and we can get into Todd Cantwell, but he is this team's best player at the moment, not only because of all the things he brings, whether it's his ability to set the tempo, win the ball back, he's just really good across the board, but he's got the personality to play for Rangers, he's got the confidence to demand the ball and make things happen, and this team looks a lot better with him. So I guess after the Kilmarnock game, all the progress that had been made kind of goes out of the window, because while Rangers are building up to the team that Michael Beale will have in his head, it will take time. The task is that you have to win while those relationships are building. And I think you're right to look at how Rangers have looked box to box. Take the game at the weekend, for example, against Livingston, and I think you could say this about the Servette game as well. The one area where I think you see Rangers, their moves break down more often, or something happen that causes frustration in the stadium, is that final pass or shot, which is what Beale said when he was speaking about actually Rabbi Matondo yesterday, talking about him getting judged on his final pass or final shot. And I think if you look at Beale's team, his philosophy, it's all about freedom in the final third, and it's about relationships in the final third, and it's about getting players. Some managers want to get their wingers isolated 1v1, and their build-up structure, the way that they play, is designed to facilitate that, because they know that that's where they're going to create chances. Others maybe rely on a lot of patterns. I think for Beale, what he relies upon is getting players like Cantwell and Lammers facing the pitch in space, in those pockets behind the opposition's midfield. And obviously, with that front three being totally new, those relationships still have to build. And I think you saw that for the first goal against Livingston. We have Lammers play it into Dessers, and Cantwell does that nice dummy. Equally, I think against Servette in midweek, there was 3 or 4 opportunities where Rangers had great opportunities on the break and transition, and it broke down quite a lot of Danilo. Obviously, it's his first game, that's not criticism, but it's just probably the reality of where Rangers are. Again, you look at that game against Livingston at the weekend, and when pace was brought into the game, it just became such a different encounter for Rangers, and that's probably quite an interesting just decide, does that front three have enough pace? What tweaks need to be made to get the best out of them? Did Danilo look better in the centre than he did out wide? Of course, Rangers weren't going to be this the best version of themselves, what Beale wants in the first game of the season. The task is to get through this vital month while they're working to that end goal. Didn't do it against Kilmarnock. They have done it over the last couple of games, and the task obviously on Tuesday night, as it was at the weekend, is to get a positive result, to buy that time to then show what they've been working on and show how these players can play together when they've had a bit of time.
Yeah, just talking about the freedom there, I think that's a really interesting point, Josh. Danilo actually talked about it after the game. I'm going to read you what he had to say. He said, "I've been working really hard since day one, and I've always wanted to score to help the team. I'm really glad that the coach gives the attackers the freedom to do what we want to do. If you're in the right position at the right time, then you need to show your quality. I'm really glad I was in the right position and could score." So that's him kind of underlining what you've said there in terms of the structure of the attack and play. Clearly, Beale is of the sort of Jose Mourinho school of perhaps less structure around the attacking thirds, and wants to give the players the autonomy to make decisions for themselves in that area.
It's interesting because obviously we can only guess by listening to podcasts and asking them questions. And do you know, to have a manager actually sit down and tell you exactly what they're trying to do. I think there is like the reason that, for example, a Beale team domestically looks, in my opinion, a lot more in control than what Gio's team did domestically, whether that be, how, for example, how they build play and how they look with the ball, is because there is real structure in the way that Cantwell dropping in means that there's a lot of rotations, which there wasn't in Gio's football. And I think there's a lot of structure within the first maybe 2/3 of the pitch, and when Rangers are against the ball. That's an underrated thing in football, something we forget about all the time. How do you retain pressure and stop the opposition getting up the pitch? Because there's no point in getting 9 players in the box and then you're obviously chasing the ball back to your goal and it's a game of basketball. But I think in the final third, and it ties into the type of player he signed, Todd Cantwell, for example, something that we wrote about in midweek and spoke about in the podcast. I don't think we've spoke about it, but there was a kind of narrative going around in pre-season that has Lammers taken his best position, because Cantwell obviously played very well in that free number 10 position towards the end of the season. And I think what you've seen over the last couple of games is, regardless, it doesn't really matter what his position is, it's what his role in the team is. And I think regardless of whether he plays that a little bit higher, whether he plays that little... he spoke about it back in April. I think he's going to have the freedom under this management, within this structure, to go and impact the game as he sees fit. And if you look at the first goal yesterday, you have the ball goes to the there to build up his right foot on the left-hand side, plays over to the right. Then Lammers is out by the touchline, and and Cantwell's receiving in the number 10 position. So I think it's all about trying to, when you're breaking teams down consistently, and you see this with the way Mikel Arteta is speaking as the Arsenal manager at the moment, it's all about trying to remain unpredictable as possible. And I think if you give someone like Cantwell or Lammers positional freedom, then it's obviously going to be unpredictable, because they don't know where they're going to go, because it depends on what happens in the game. So I think there is obviously real structure, and especially against the ball, especially in the build-up play. But I think the final third is a lot about attacking freedom, is a lot about what relationships players can build together. And naturally, I think that'll take a bit of time, because a lot of these players, not only are they new to the club, but they're also new to one another.
Let's drill into some of the detail from the game, Josh. You were there, I wasn't. I was watching it on the telly, but as people know, I've got an 18-month-old child who's running about daft in front of me. So I can't say I was paying massive attention to the tiny details that you're paying attention to. So listen, for me, it looked like a decent start that Rangers made. They were total control. They got the early goal. They were knocking the ball about nicely, some nice little passing, intricate bits of play. And then, say 30, 35 minutes, they started to kind of slow down a little bit. Maybe looked a little bit like the fitness had fallen away a little bit, or they'd lost and run out of ideas. And I think that continued at the start of the second half until the point that you got to where Beale made that crucial substitution, bringing on Ravi Matondo and Abdullah Sima. And from that point on, Rangers really, really looked much more threatening, much more dangerous. Can you talk me through this this graph that you've got there, the racetrack graph that shows us how the game panned out from an XG point of view?
Yeah, well, we've got a piece that I don't know if it's in the description, Johnny, or the comments, but I'm sure you can fire it in there from today. I watched the game back on the flight over, a bit bleary-eyed, but so we've got a kind of big breakdown of the game on the website. I think the race chart, if anyone doesn't know, basically just charts the expected goals throughout the game, and obviously it charts up because the total gets bigger, but the kind of bigger the indent, the higher the quality of chance. So when you see the goals go in, normally they're going to have a higher indent up towards the top of the graph. Rangers started pretty well over the first 10 minutes, and their first goal I thought was a really good goal. Again, touches on a lot of the themes we've just spoken about, where you have control in the first line, you have Cantwell setting the 10, playing to the far side of the pitch, which was a big feature, I thought, of the game on Wednesday night. His ability to, he's not a number 6, but again, that freedom means that for the first goal, he's picking it up off the centre backs to switch play as if he was a number 6. Goal in midweek, he's actually covering John Souttar as he runs forward, of the role that he has to play as he sees fit. But after that first goal, which wasn't actually your chance, I think it was 0.14, very high post shot XG. Lammers, it's absolute chaos in the road, don't know where they're going. Meaning that although it looks pretty.
Josh, you're going a little bit intermittent with your internet signal there, so I'm just going to cut in. Maybe you should turn off your video just for a few seconds and allow it to kind of. We can just hear your dulcet tones that way, and perhaps that'll be a little bit more effective.
Okay, we'll do that. How's that? Is that a bit better?
I think it is, yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Lama's chance was not a particularly high value chance because if you watch it back, one side of the goal is covered and he actually finishes it really well. And there's an interesting aside there in the way that Lammers, as a striker playing in that number 10 position, gives you what he gives outside so far with his role to be the free man, to add extra in possession, to go and receive the ball between the lines, but then actually get on the end of a lot of crosses in midweek as well. So that's probably an interesting aside. After that, Johnny, there was not much, as you can see. Rangers still had quite a lot of control. Michael Beale called them stuffy after, I think, about the 20-minute mark, because Cifuentes obviously gets that debut goal, which is rightly chalked off, I think, for handball. And thereafter, Livingston created nothing of note, really, because their blue line is really low, it's really limited. But Jack Butland actually made two really good saves. Andrew Shinney had two shots from range that had a relatively high pull shot XG for considering the distance they were taken from. They also had that cross into the box that John Suter did really well to block. So it became around that kind of 55, 60-minute mark. It became pretty edgy within the stadium, and naturally so, because this is a reality of football, isn't it, where it's a 4-0 game and happy days, but if a goal was to go in at that moment because of the context of where Rangers are, it could just go so toxic so quickly. So I think you need to give Michael Beale credit for the substitutions, because I don't know about you, Johnny, but probably wasn't the subs I'd have made. Bringing on Sima and Matondo. Sima, someone who's just at the start of his Rangers career. Matondo, someone who hasn't really lit up his Rangers career at all so far. But what that did is, it just, because the game was open, to go up the pitch in the way that they hadn't done with the front three before. It allowed Danilo to go into the middle. Dessers didn't have a great afternoon all round, even if he played a big hand in the first goal. And then from that point, you can see those kind of three goals towards the end of the match. You have the second one from Danilo, which kind of releases a pressure valve with an Ibrox. A good ball from Borna Barisic towards the back post. Danilo with really good movement and playing in that central role as opposed to a little bit wider as he had been earlier. Sima then scores from a corner after Danilo had hit the post, and then the late goal, which is an excellent goal from Kieran Dowell, a top quality goal after Matondo had carried the ball up the pitch. So, you know, if you're looking at the topic of pace in the front three, I think it's quite an interesting case study, because especially away from home, you saw with Fashion Sakala last year how effective that could be. Think at Hibs, Hearts, obviously Kent was someone who's quick as well. And when you hear Michael Beale speak in the press conference last week, or I think it was in the newspapers, about a potential Kent replacement, that maybe opens the door to the conversation of, do Rangers need a little bit more pace, or aside from Sam Lammers, another ball carrier in the final third? Because I thought the improvement when those two players came on for where the game was, everyone could see it. It was really obvious, and it helped make it a quite emphatic win in the end for Rangers.
Just want to touch on the defenders, Josh, because I think everybody watching the game was impressed by John Suter. Once again, I asked Michael Beale about Suter in the press conference, and he was glowing. But also Leon Balogun coming back and looking very, very comfortable, dealing with Joel Newbley, who's not an easy player in terms of his sheer bulk, physicality, but Balogun dealt with that really well. But perhaps it's one of these situations where it kind of shows you the limitations of XG, just from a stats point of view, in that Livingston felt a lot more threatening watching it than that 0.2 sort of suggests. And you point out there was a few moments there that felt quite almost decisive, that they didn't go Livingston's way, but aren't really properly, I suppose, registered on that scale that we're looking at.
Yeah, of course, and this is why you're totally right. But this is why that it can be a helpful graphic, but it's not cut and dry, is it? You know, if your centre back, if you're a Rangers team and your centre back is man of the match at home against Livingston, it tells you that it was not a 4-0 game in the conventional sense, doesn't it? Because Suter was really good on the ball, and again, playing on that right-hand side, which is his favourite side, allowed him to really carry the ball forward. We had this defensive action map in the piece that you've put in the comment section as well. And Balogun too, you know, I think with Leon Balogun coming back, the worry always was his injury record, but if he's rotated properly as he was in the title winning season, as opposed to maybe the season after that, where he had that terrible game against Hibs after playing so many games in a short space of time, and I think he was actually injured and out of action for a while after that, which is where, I think that's when Calvin Bassey came into centre half, wasn't it? So yeah, I totally agree with you. I thought Livingston actually had quite a good goal, and Davy Martindale said that in the press conference after. I think it was his 10th time he's come to Ibrox with Livingston, and he said, I've been on. I've left here with the score being 2-0, but it's been much more of a battering, I think was the word he used. It's been much more emphatic, whereas this included a few late goals late on. Equally, if you look at Rangers' first 30 minutes, I think they were more dangerous than the XG gives them credit for. And we'll get into the pass network in a second, but the midfield balance is obviously one of the key talking points. And having two attacking players in alongside Nico Raskin, I think that has to, for me, be the way forward in home games domestically going forwards.
Hey, let's get into this pass map, Josh. But see, before we talk about the players that are outfield, let's just have a quick word on Jack Butland, because he's not had a ton to do since he's arrived at Rangers, but I think it's safe to say that what he has done has looked very, very assured. And without wanting to go in too hard on a club legend who has been a phenomenal keeper in Alan McGregor, we do know that using this StatsBomb data that we have, that last season McGregor and McLaughlin combined were on a goals saved above average stat of -13, which means that Rangers lost 13 more goals than they would be expected to do so on XG. Now, when we had the live show, Josh, one of the points I made was that for me, Jack Butland is the signing of the summer, because if you correct that -13 and make it just 0, you have a keeper that's just performing at a standard level of expectation. The marginal gain that people talk about in that change would be phenomenal. Never mind going in and getting a keeper who should perform above that XG number, as Alan McGregor has done in the past.
Yeah, totally agree. Yesterday, as mentioned, that expected goals for Livingston was pretty small. But if you take their post-shot expected goals, and just to explain that, if people don't know what it means, expected goals takes the chance value before you've considered the position of the goalkeeper, the actual quality of the shot, because obviously, a shot with a 0.01 expected goals value from 35 yards at corner, and therefore once a shot has been taken, it's going to be a lot higher than 0.01. So yesterday, I think it was 0.61 post-shot expected goals that Jack Butland faced, so he's performed slightly above average, obviously in a tiny sample size. The goalie conceded at Kilmarnock was a really high-value finish. Obviously condoned Rangers to defeat in the opening day. I thought he made those two saves at the right time, absolutely. I think you can see that he commands his area. I actually think his kicking's been pretty good so far when he's been under pressure, especially on his left foot. Maybe seen that a little bit more in the friendlies. But I think he's just a commanding presence in goals, isn't he? He's here at the right time in his career. I don't think there's any doubts about his quality. He's not played for the last couple of years for a number of reasons, but you're spot on, Johnny. If he performs to a decent level for Rangers, you're going to see a significant upgrade over the last couple of seasons. Now, obviously, you're right. You have to always caveat that discussion with what Alan McGregor has done, but there's no doubting that the last couple of seasons compared to the one before, there was a significant drop-off, and that shows, and you can cite examples of that. But I think the way that Butland's come in so early on and made that position a really assured one, aggressive off his line as well. There was a challenge he made in the Kilmarnock game after about 15 minutes where you thought that's quite risky, but obviously has the confidence to pull it off, which is important. And when you did a piece on the website speaking to his ex-teammates, something that, and I think that's a good way to often gauge what these players are like, because as we've said throughout the summer, signing someone like Sam Lammers, the difference between signing a player whose career hasn't worked out for reasons within their control and without their control. Todd Cantwell arrived at Rangers and there was these rumours that is he going to work hard off the ball? Is he got attitude problems and that's why he's out of the team? And I think you can quite confidently say that you've only seen evidence to the complete contrary. And in that piece with Jack Butland, what kind of came through right throughout it was this is someone who, even when he's not been playing, trains brilliantly every single day. He is someone who sets the standards. He's a leader in the dressing room. And I think in the small doses that you've seen him on the pitch so far, that certainly came true. Because I think at the live show as well, your shout was that he could potentially be Rangers signing of the season, if I'm right.
Yes, that's what I said, yeah.
Yeah, do you want to give us a bit? I thought you were going to give us a little bit of a reasoning behind that.
For Butland,
Yeah. Yeah.
No, just obviously, as I said, I don't know if you're. I thought I said that. Perhaps you're dipping in and out, but
No. I did hear you.
just on the basis that Butland will be someone who's capable of performing at a goal saved above average level that's well above McGregor and McLaughlin. We're
Yeah.
talking about an EPL keeper, and he just looks every inch that. And what I mean by that is the confidence and the swagger of a guy who's played at the very, very top level. Look at the way he speaks to the media. He's a calm, assuring, intelligent individual who I think just exudes a sort of sense of organisation and quality. So you stick someone like that in there, and I think you'll see an instant difference. Now, it's too small a sample size you're talking about, but at the same time, we can make early judgments on what we're seeing, and it just strikes me as this is a guy who's very much an EPL player dropping down to a level that is significantly lower in terms of the week to week of the SPFL. Now, I think if we talk about getting past Servette and on to PSV, and certainly in the Europa League or the Champions League, you'll see Jack Butland tested a lot more. But the bread and butter, Josh, for me, he is dealing with very, very, very comfortably so far, and is looking really good. Listen, I'll move on to this passing network in general, because you put up a passing network for the Killie game that caused a lot of anger and dismay. I'm not sure if that was really what you intended.
I don't even think I put it up, Joe. I think it was. It made its way onto Twitter somehow through the article, and you're right. It was not well received. Put it that way.
Yes. Now, let's ignore the rights and wrongs of that, and whether or not that was people interpreting it correctly. To me, I look at this, and I think this looks much more like what Michael Beale's trying to do in terms of look at the danger coming from the wide areas. Borna Barisic, James Tavernier, bright reds. That means the OBV is really, really strong from those areas. You've got Jose Cifuentes is the same. Perhaps you would like to see more impact from Danilo, Dessers and Lammers, but if we're talking about, to use the Warburton phrase, pitch geography, it looks quite nice in terms of the positions teams, the players are taking up, and in terms of the way they're positioned, and kind of what you would expect for this formation.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when you speak about freedom, that I guess for some managers they will want, there's a constant debate on football Twitter raging on about should teams be set out in this kind of methodical chess-like structure, or should they be given freedom? And I guess for some managers, they'll want the half spaces covered perfectly. They'll want it to look almost like it's been, it's totally symmetrical. And for other managers, maybe Beale falls somewhere between these categories. It's because there's more freedom in the final third, then naturally sometimes the balance is going to go over to one of the sides of the pitch more. You see, for example, even there's a slight bias towards the right side of the pitch and what Rangers are doing a lot at the moment. I think especially with Barisic on the side, because obviously we know what he brings, we know what he doesn't. He can't. I don't think he gives you as much variation as someone like Tavernier or Ridvan, who can move inside, who can stay deep and build. But he's obviously got that exceptional quality, which means that he's at his best when he's kind of high on the left and in those positions. But that means that you're somewhat limited because there's a little bit less variation what you can do on the left-hand side. So I don't think it's a surprise that you see more involvement of Rangers on the right. Encouraging that Cifuentes, if people don't know, on-ball value effectively just takes every action on the pitch and it logs. It's kind of StatsBomb's latest kind of big stat. And the early proponents of a stat like this, I think, was Liverpool way back when they were signing, Andy Robertson and Gini Wijnaldum, looking effectively at, okay, these players might not be playing in fantastic teams, this defender might have conceded X number of goals, but what is their overall value in terms of how many goals they contribute to, how many goals they contribute to compared to how many goals conceded they contribute to. What is their overall kind of positive or negative value in the ultimate score of football, which is the scoreline, the only real score that matters. So to see Cifuentes so high on that on-ball value stat is really encouraging. And he gave you, it's not even so much what he gave on the ball yesterday, Johnny, the pick of the bunch alongside John Suter, but it's just because player, and he can do all he can build. And for the goal, he's behind James Tavernier, playing the pass in, to run beyond as well. And I thought that, especially when you're trying to destabilize it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Josh. Are you still there, Josh? You were just breaking up a little bit there. You're still there, yeah. Listen, one player I wanted to talk a little bit about was Cyril Dessers, because there's been a number of reactions to his performance. Now, a number of the newspapers were sort of talking about him having been jeered off the pitch. First of all, is that true?
I don't think so. I think there was certainly reaction that went astray, naturally, but frustration of the team as opposed to an individual player.
Yeah.
Time. He's missed pre-season, Johnny. He missed the end of last season. He's had a late. I think he will take a.
Josh, your internet is being a bit ropey. You're coming and going a little bit again there. So I don't know if you want to come off this and go back on and just see if you can sharpen that up a little bit, because it was really interesting what you were saying, but I can certainly carry on. I think there's still a long way to go with Cyril Dessers. I like his physicality. I like his strength. But to me, he looks like that he's clearly not quite fit. You know, he was... By the end of that game, well, certainly, but by the end of his game, because he obviously came off as a substitute, to me, he just looked like he was running in treacle a little bit, like he'd run his race. And I think that's symptomatic of a guy who's had a pretty broken pre-season. Michael Beale said that himself. But when you're spending 4.5 million or whatever the figure actually is on a striker like that, I think it's pretty important that you go out and you get someone into the team and give them an opportunity to build up, because you can't really give them you can't get their fitness up any other way, and sometimes it can be a little bit tough and a little bit brutal to watch, and you've got to hope that he gets sharper and sharper as games go on. But I think there's enough there to say I see what he's going to give. He's not slow. He's certainly good in terms of his positioning. He's strong, and he will provide some level of focal point for Rangers. I think that much is clear. He did tire badly. I think that's a fair point from Thomas there. If there's any questions, guys, while Josh is having his issues out in Geneva, fire them in and I'll try my best to get back to them. So as Josh comes back again, let's see if we can get him back on. Mr. Barry, how are you doing?
Sorry, I think we more, Johnny, because it's coming and going.
Yes, indeed it is. Josh, you can go. I will come back to you in a second. I will phone you on WhatsApp and we can touch base. But I think we should probably call it a day there, guys. This is the perils of live podcasting from another country. Josh is we wanted them to be able to come at you from a bar in Geneva with a pint and have a kind of relaxing chat, but it's not been possible, unfortunately, there. So listen, guys, thank you for coming in. Thank you for watching the live show. Getting lots of comments back about Dessers. I would have loved to have drilled into a bit more detail on that, guys, and really got Josh's opinion on it. As I say, I wasn't at the game, so I need to hear from him what his take on it was. But I think it's fair to say that he didn't have a great match. He's not looking absolutely sharp at the moment. But let's hope, with our fingers crossed, that that's going to come good for Rangers. And certainly, well, there would be no better time than on Tuesday, would there? Listen, guys, thank you all for joining. It's been a great half an hour to chat Rangers. Sadly, we've not been able to stay on a little bit longer because of Josh's connection, but we hope you will catch up with us in the days ahead. We're going to have plenty of content coming from Geneva. Josh will be on the morning briefing tomorrow, of course, and he'll be coming there from his hotel room, so we should have stable Wi-Fi. And then from there, we'll be doing all sorts. Josh will be going to the stadium, give you a bit of a stadium tour around Servette, give the fans a sense of what bars and what's available around there before going in, hopefully, to the stadium itself. And then later on in the evening, we shall obviously have the press conference, both from Michael Beale and potentially as well, if there's an English section, from Servette's boss. So that should be plenty to keep you going for tomorrow. And then, of course, Tuesday's the big game. So, listen, thanks very much for joining. Thanks very much for listening to us. And we will catch up with you very,